truly a pleasure to be here. And I want to give, first of all, start by giving a strong plug for the Canadian Co-Housing Network. I was one of the founding board members that founded the Coho US, our nonprofit here in the United States. And I just think that the nonprofit has been just an absolutely critical piece of growing co-housing in the United States. So I would really urge all of you to support and become members of the association. And I think actually I think about it not so much as what do you get out of this organization? It is your organization, but really how are you going to spread this? Because I don't know about you, but for me, the reason I'm involved in co-housing is because I think we desperately need new models for resilient communities. And what I found in co-housing was something that I thought, if enough people understood this, I think a lot of people could get on board with this. So I know with my own effort being here tonight and my own involvement in the Co-Housing Association of the United States, it's not because what I get out of it, but because I want other people to get more out of it. So I would encourage all of you, even if your community is a member of the association, that doesn't mean you can't also give an individual donation to help them further their work. I know in the US, that's the #1 place that people find communities now is through cohousing.org. The virtual events they did last year were fabulous and keeping everybody going through the pandemic. So it's just been, I think, a critical link of how do we, instead of just being a bunch of individual communities, how do we actually create a movement? So yeah, I've been around co-housing for a long time now, basically my entire adult life. And I have been in the trenches on pretty much every level of it. So I've been the architect. I was the partner architect in McCammon and Dredd Architects, led a lot of projects through that design process. I've been the developer that partnered with co-housing groups. I've just worked through the booms, worked through the bust of the financial fallout of 2008 and 2009. And now Co-Housing Solutions, I work as a development consultant. So I see my role as spreading the best practices that we've learned over the last 35 years so that groups can then build on those and adapt them to their own communities. So it's actually fascinating work because I feel sometimes like I'm the butterfly spreading pollen between the flowers, and I take the best ideas from one community and off to the next community. And so we can continue to learn from each other. I also have a 500 Communities program, which is a year-long training for professionals that want to work in this space. I would say that after 30 years of creating communities, we've actually gotten pretty good at creating communities. We've created a lot of really successful communities. We haven't been as good at supporting or defining the professional roles. And I think in order to really grow and scale co-housing, we also need more sustainable professional roles. So that's what I do through my 500 Communities program. I have one affiliate in Canada, Sarah Arthurs, based in Calgary. So it's always fun. We also have a gal from Australia. So we're branching out to, abroad, because I find the same principles and approaches and lessons learned are actually very adaptable in different cultures, even though each community is unique and different in its own way. So yes, and so you mentioned I'm working with Mosaic Village in Calgary and Kawartha Commons in Petersboro. My first project in Canada was Windsong, way back when, and with Nelson there in British Columbia as well. So I would say I am not the expert on financing in Canada, and particularly subsidies in Canada, but I have found that my experience is pretty adaptable what you're facing there. So from dream to reality. Now, here's the harsh reality. If you actually want to get to reality, you got to give up some of the dream. It's hard, right? But that is, I think the first step is realizing that the dream is perfect, reality never is. So I have lived in co-housing most of my adult life. First of all, in a very urban community, Doyle Street co-housing in the heart of the San Francisco Bay Area, and now in Nevada City co-housing in the Sierra foothills. So, and I could go, I do lots of presentations where I could just talk about how fabulous it is to live in co-housing. But you didn't ask me to do that. You talked about what are some of the lessons learned to actually get communities built. And that is really what drives me, is I want to get communities built. I don't want to sit around and talk about it. I don't want to have potlucks talking about wouldn't it be great to live in community. I want to get them built. I want to eat in the common house. And I want to help anybody who wants to get them built in whatever way I can. So I think the first step is often giving up some of the dream, trying not to meet every need of society. And really getting down to core goals. Don't try to do it all. Focus on what do you need to do to get this community built, because so much is possible once you're sitting around the dining table in your common house and can carry it forward, and you don't have to drive across town to get together. So that is often when I start working with communities, is a little bit of unpeeling of trying to get to the core of what they're trying to do. Because after all, who would not want to join a community in a walkable neighborhood next to open space, close to transit, very ecologically progressive, the cutting edge, and affordable to everybody? Yeah, I'd join that community in a minute. Have I been able to get that one built? Not yet. So first thing is really cutting down to what is your core aspects of what you're trying to do, and don't try to meet everybody's needs. You can support other communities. You can perfectly fine to say, well, I think that's a really interesting idea, and I really wish you the best of luck in pursuing that. But I don't think that's not really the focus of our community here. So that's really the first thing, is really scaling back, not growing so big. And this word prioritize, you're going to hear me say that a lot. So number 2, if you're not willing to put your own money on the line, nobody's going to do it for you. A lot of communities waste years, literally, because nobody wants to put their own money in. So in founding a community, to actually, getting a new community built as opposed to buying into an existing community, you really are entrepreneurs. And, if you're starting a business, you've got to put your own money in first to launch the project. So I think that I find that usually, the nice thing about my work is I don't talk to people very long without them paying, because I don't really have time to do that. So find good expertise, be willing to hire them. That's when people really start to get serious about moving a project forward. Until then, you're a potluck club talking about an interesting idea. So this is a bit of a long quote, but I thought I would take the time here to read it to you, because it's the quote I send communities when they're struggling and they have to raise money. And I found this is a great book, The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist. Lynn Twist does a lot of fundraising for nonprofits. And she says, one of the great dynamics of money is that it grounds us. When we put money behind our commitments, it grounds them too, making them real in the world. We can wish for better schools, a clean environment, my words here, or a more socially and environmentally sustainable neighborhood to live in, and world peace. We can even volunteer, but when we also put our money behind those intentions, we become really serious about them. Money is the great translator of intention to reality, vision to fulfillment. So if you have a group that's meeting and people aren't putting in money, I don't think you're very real. That really is the first step. Then I would say the next thing is really getting good expertise. Co-housing, you are not inventing real estate development, right? There's developers out there building 30-unit developments all the time. So you don't have to invent that part. What you have to focus on is what takes a typical conventional real estate development and makes it a community? Those are the things that you as co-housers really need to focus on. So I think, getting good expertise, being willing to pay for expertise can really shortcut the time as well as saving you a lot of money. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't ask good questions, that you want to work closely with your professionals. But I just don't really understand why anybody would attempt to do most of my projects that I'm working on are $10 to $30 million projects. Why would you try to do a 10 to 30 million project without good expertise from people who have done that before? Of course, if you're going to pay them, it's helpful to take their advice. And that's surprisingly challenging for a lot of people. So I think really asking your professional team to help you hold the budget, agreeing on what is a reasonable budget, not living in a fantasy world about what you would like the budget to be, and then really listening to the professionals and the advice they give you. I was just on a call today with the professionals for one of my client groups. And that was actually the thing that was the theme of the whole discussion was they won't take our advice. So, I would watch for that. I know, whether you're an architect, whether you're a developer, whether you're a contractor, whether you're a process consultant, and you really, what you want is happy clients. But it's hard to be the person who says, well, I don't see how you can afford that with what your budget is. So it's pretty easy to shut down the best advice you're getting by fighting with your professionals. And that happens a surprising amount of time. So I find, as a developer and as an architect, I've hired a lot of consultants over the years myself. And when I'm managing consultants, one of the things I watch for is to make sure they really own their part of the project. So I want to understand what they want to do. I want to make sure they understand our priorities for the project. But if I've hired them, I have decided that they bring professional expertise I want. And I don't want to pick it apart in a way that they no longer have ownership of what they're doing. So, and it's pretty easy to do that, right? I mean, it's surprisingly, if you're, I often am in person talking to groups about budgets. And, I'm only going to fight you so many times on I don't really think that's feasible to build it on that cost. And then I'll just stay quiet and you'll find out when it goes to bid. So get good advice, take that advice, and then really bring your professionals in so that, particularly on the budget, but also your priorities for the community, that you are giving them clear direction. So one of the things I've seen really works is that a maximum community participation early on, when you're really trying to define your vision, your goals, and your program. So that usually, so one of the things is I have found you're not really a core group until you have property, you put money down to pay for your professionals, and you're moving forward on that property. People can work and talk together about the concept of co-housing. That doesn't make you a core group. And pretty consistently, I would say almost always, once you get to that point and it suddenly goes from this big idea of how we could live together in community to this very specific, it's this property on this timeline at this cost, that there's a sort out of the group. It's pretty typical that most communities lose about half of their members at that stage. So that's when I think you're really starting to make decisions, because that's when you start to build a core group that's committed to a specific community on a specific time and place. And you're starting to put up real money. So that gets people much more committed, because it's not just $100 for pizza, it's now $10,000 and you're paying real architects. So one of the things I would always suggest is that the community spend time early on in that programming and schematic design phase, really getting clear about your vision, your goals, and what your program is. And that then you step back. If you can give your professional team clarity on that, you can be less involved in the design, or should be less involved in the design and construction side. And I'm shifting your focus as community members to marketing, getting to know your neighbors, and really building those relationships. So the community needs to discipline itself. Your architect's not going to do it for you. Your development partner is not going to do it for you. Even your process person is going to give up if you guys are all over the map, right? And so learning how to discipline each other and call each other on, these are what our agreements are. Where this is, we've already decided we're not going to try to do that. I often, you know, as a person who part of my job is finding development partners for my client groups, helping them hire architects and the other professionals they need. I'm quite convinced that early stage co-housing groups would scare off any developer in about the first 30 seconds. So, you know, it's sort of, you know, you think about family, you don't air your laundry, keep the messy stuff internal. Because for your professional partners, it can be a little overwhelming. So I think the community doing what you need to do to make decisions, and so that you can provide clear direction to your professionals, really makes a big difference. And then this word I'm going to use over and over again, prioritize. This is Mosaic Village prioritizing their common house. You know, and everybody wants to put everything on one line, and that doesn't give your professionals anything. So it's actually really hard work for a group to work through a series of priorities, whether it's what you're going to have in your common house, or what are you willing to give up in order to hold your prices when you get to value engineering. But there is nothing more helpful to your professional team than to give them a clear order of priorities about what you are willing to pay extra for versus what, you know, it'd be nice if you could afford it, but if we can't get it in that budget, we're willing to give it up. So, and I think that's really is part of really the key here is that I find people just live in this fantasy of what they can afford for a long time. I think most of you read the headlines all last year. I spent most of last year walking my client groups through the largest construction cost increases we'd ever seen. Many communities faced big jumps in prices right as they were getting ready to start construction. It was hard, it was unexpected, and nobody could have predicted it. But the groups that had strong relationships and had clear priorities, they all survived. They're all getting under construction now. So they were able to work through those difficult decisions and hold on to the community. That, I mean, one of the things I find is it's pretty, you know, what's happened to construction cost all over the world, and certainly in North America, there is no extra room. So the idea that you could add additional energy efficiency, add, you know, prep for solar, that you're doing adding things that are not normal in new housing construction in the speculative world, and get it for the same or less money. I just don't know how you do that. You know, if you're adding more, you need to be willing to pay for it. So as you look at, it's actually really useful to go and see new housing, what's being built right now in your region. What standards are they meeting? Because pretty much everything you add to that is going to add to your price, right? So is it worth it to add to my price? Is it something we could do later? Is it something that's integral? And we do want to do it now, and we are willing to pay for it. Those are the hard decisions for a community to make. It's one thing to reorganize the buildings on a site, but it's another when you get into, well, we want triple pane windows, we want the super energy efficient heating system, we want everything to be low toxic. Those things, yeah, it's a little bit here and a little bit there. Budgets are not broken by one silver bullet you can take out. When you're trying to get a construction budget back in line, you are really, you're getting 10,000 out here and 20,000 out there. It's bits and pieces. It's very hard to pull it out. So I would say more strongly than I've ever said before, as particularly with regard to your design for the building, is to scale back your expectations, have a short list of things that you would like to add if you can, and go out to bid with that, not everything you ever wanted. Unfortunately, the way most communities do it is they're unwilling to give up things until they've tested the market and gone out to bid. And you never get the full cost out again. So you'll get a much better price. I mean, literally the way, subcontractors bid projects, they don't spend all day checking every little detail. They take a look at the plans. They say, wow, that looks complicated. Yep, I'm going to put it in at a, $10.50 a square foot. And right now everybody's busy. Every contractor, if they're not busy, I'd be worried, right? Because every housing is getting built like crazy. So rather than layering on all your dream ideas in your plan and testing the market with that, and then trying to pull stuff out to get your price down, which you never get it out. Once it's gone out, there's a real thing called subcontractors fatigue. They're not going to look at it, and they're never going to pull that as much money out as if you had clean, simple drawings that were not too complicated to bid first, and then you could add a few things. I think it's hard to appreciate because I think all these things on their own are small things. But sit down and talk to a subcontractor when you've gone to bid. And, this is where it's like, well, that unit is just like this other unit. That's a B prime instead of a B plus. And the B prime is just like the B plus, except that blah, 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 blah. Right? Well, that's a totally different unit. Right? And so once, I just had this happening when the Bozeman co-housing community, great group, out to bid. They say, well, it's not really competitive bidding right now. It's more like a recruitment process to get anybody to bid because everybody is so busy. And somehow there were 7 different kinds of siding on the exteriors of those buildings. We should have caught that. We should have taken that out earlier and simplified those buildings before it went to bid. And that's just one of, 100 different things that are typical in co-housing communities when they go to bid. So, I think particularly with your buildings, get very, very clear what is different from what you're building compared to other new construction in your area. And are you willing to pay extra to get it? That's really the question I ask communities. Once, I think after that design really the community should be most involved in the schematic design process. So setting the program, setting the goals and priorities, and then looking at the floor plans and the look. After that schematic design process, get out of the way. You need to decide on countertops, but that's really a time when the community adds very little, and mostly you add cost by being more involved in that process. So through the phases of design development, construction documents, and during construction, the community should really shift your focus away from and let the professionals focus on their work, which is getting the best that they can out of your construction dollar. And again, having clear priorities, having clear what to focus on, that will really help them. This is one of my projects here where this is the group site visit. So yeah, community members can visit the construction site, but only on a designated day once a month. Otherwise, no community member is allowed on the construction site other than to drop off donuts to the construction crew. And I firmly enforce that on my projects. Because if they're talking to you, they're not focused on the work they're supposed to be doing. So I don't want them talking to you. I want them focused, and all decisions, all communication is going to go through the owner's representative representing the group working directly with the contractor. So my goal, so I think just thinking about that is one of the exciting reasons to join an early stage group, is because you can be involved in setting those early goals and priorities. Whereas once you get that schematic design done, I think the community's work is really selling out the project, raising the money, and building relationships with your future neighbors. So you are really consciously deciding the kind of culture you want to live in when you move in. And that's the important thing, is right. You can hire out the bookkeeping. You can hire out the architecture. You can, there's lots of stuff you can hire out. What you cannot hire out is building the relationships, right? That's the real work of community. And one of the things that is really fascinating to me, because I've seen so many communities from that very initial kickoff workshop when the group first comes together, all the way through to completion, is I am absolutely convinced that the stronger the relationships are in the community, the stronger the project is financially. That the communities that survived these unexpected price increases last year, they survived them because they were committed to each other, because it was no longer about this thing in the building or meeting this standard for energy efficiency. It was more, it had shifted during that process to, it's about the community. And even though I could afford a little bit more, I really want Joe and Sally to be part of my community because I've gotten to know them and I really want them there. And so they're not going to be able to afford that. So I want to hold them in. And when I think that's the real power of the work that I do, is to watch that process evolve, to watch a group of individuals walk into the room as individuals initially and end up being a real community by the time they move in, because they've shifted away from what I need to what we need to succeed. So just some details about holding your budget. So the first thing is to be clear about your construction budget with your architect and your other professionals. Now, that means that it's actually hearing what they are building for today and making sure that it's analogous to what you're talking about. Even with that, you're likely to hit surprises. So just as a small example, one of the things I see really consistently, I talk to a lot of contractors. I work with a lot of different contractors. I have tremendous respect. A good contractor, it's a tough job. But there really is very few contractors that are out there building projects that are similar to co-housing, where you have smaller unit sizes. And so when they translate what they're building for today as a cost per square foot, they are often surprised when a project goes to bid about the higher cost per square foot to build smaller homes. So when the way many builders build, and you see it, right now it's the 3-story townhouses being built all over the place. There's a lot of big empty space in that. Certainly in the US is, bigger homes, but they are not as expensive to build as a cost per square foot because of all this sort of empty space. I think we can live in much smaller, well-designed homes. But the cost of construction is going to be a little bit higher just because they are smaller. So I think really, getting real about what's the construction budget you're trying to meet, and that all of you are working together to meet that. And so that's the professionals, your engineers, and that you give and actually ask your architect to push back when you're asking for things that they are concerned might not be in their budget. And I can tell you that's hard for an architect. When I was practicing as an architect, I want all that cool stuff. If you say you want it, I can design it. You don't have to ask twice. I think it's fabulous. But if you're saying, can you do that within this budget? That's a different question. So realize that particularly your design professionals, it's an art to hold a budget, but they want to do all the cool stuff too. So if you are not really working together between you, you're going to design yourselves right out of your budget. So, and there are some really, some simple things about, and architects, developers know this. So again, listen to your designs. If you have a multi-floor community, stacking units makes a huge difference. So there's no changes in floor plans. The 2-bedroom on the ground floor is exactly the same as the 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor. All your plumbing runs straight up. It's stacked over. All your structural walls run straight up. Sure, yeah, I can change that floor. I can move on the 2nd floor. I can move that wall a little bit over. You'll never even appreciate where the money went because it's buried in structural in the walls. So those, again, there are tricks that developers and architects use. Yes, you can do it differently. It's just going to cost you more money. So, and I see it. I sit through, I lead these workshops. I see it all the time. It's like, well, could we do this? Yeah, sure, you could do that. How many times do you want me to say it's just going to cost you more? You get tired of saying that. So you stop saying that. So I would say the other thing is really avoiding redesign. Redesign rarely is worth it. I could tell you stories all day long about communities that redesigned this particular unit plan to get this one household happy. That household wasn't there at the end of the day. They weren't a buyer by the time it was done. And so I think as people join your community, you really want to be clear. These decisions are made. We are not going back. We are moving forward from here. So be very, very careful about any redesign, particularly if it's a redesign to make somebody happy. And there really isn't additional value in it. Again, I think the other aspect of that is to realize that your professionals get worn out. We're all excited at the beginning of the project. Once you're reworking a design for the umpteenth time, you're just not going to, it's hard to care as much. It's hard to give it the same effort. So redesign is one of those things. And redesigning to cut your construction cost after you've gone to bid and you're trying to get under construction is expensive and difficult. And you, again, rarely get the full value back out. So this is the dream, people you're just convinced that you can get better than what they're building out there without paying extra for it. I wish it was true, but I think, if they're not building it out there every day, are you willing to pay more to get it? Just ask yourself that over and over again. And then once you get to construction, my goal is there's no, and I mean no, group initiated changes during construction. One of the things I think that people don't appreciate is the culture of a construction site, which is very different than the culture of a co-housing group. And, when I've had really tight budgets that I had to maintain through construction, and I was the one on site working with the contractor, I found that I could really get them to hold it as long as I didn't ask for anything. Now, again, remember, your professionals just want happy clients. So if you're sitting there in the construction trailer and talking about, oh, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? I can, place my bets that the project managers go, what do you want me to get a price for that? Because that's what they're used to doing, right? But as soon as they are chasing out pricing for different things, you have already affected the culture. And that whole construction site sniffs, oh, there's more money here than they told us there was. And it's much, much harder from there on out to hold your cost. So get your design done, stay out of it. Really, the community should have no changes. During construction, you're responding to questions that may come to you, usually with a small committee. Most of them won't ever even go to the whole group. Of like, well, we had wanted this particular light fixture, but it's hung up in a warehouse in China. It's not going to get here for 9 months. How about this light fixture instead? Can you live with that? Sure, we can live with that. Those are the kinds of things that I would expect the community members to be responding to during construction. So, and again, it's not any one thing. It's all the little pieces and how they add up. It's the Pandora's box where you lose control. And in this particular environment where it's just really hard on construction sites because of the supply chain issues, because of the lack of labor, that any little extra thing kind of has expansive quality. I mean, it means more than it might in a more normal construction period. Now, I'm sure you're going to ask, so I'll just answer it here. Everybody's been asking it for the last year and a half. Since construction costs went up so much last year, should we just wait until they come down? Construction costs don't come down. They go up in big chunks and then they level out. They hardly ever actually come down. So I would not wait for construction costs to come down, but I would really discipline your project and remember that community isn't about the buildings, right? Is there, you want good, solid, energy efficient buildings? Absolutely. But just be really careful about the little things that I find in the end don't really make a difference for people in their satisfaction and happiness living in their community once they get to move in. So the hard knocks of getting projects built. I want to open up to questions here and see what's on your mind. So I will stop my share. And
thanks so much, Katie. That was really, it is a hard message for professionals to give to groups, but I think it's a real honest and important message to give to groups. I just worked on finishing 2 projects here in Vancouver, Driftwood and Little Mountain, and exactly what you say is exactly true on how groups, if they really want to get a project built, yeah, that's the tricky reality that we have to come to. So yeah, we have several questions here, so we'll see how many we can get through. So, and if you can just give like your quickest answer to all of them, it would be great. So the first one is, data says 90% of co-housing projects fail or groups fail before they get to building anything. What are the main challenges that cause projects to fail, and what can we do to mitigate those challenges and improve the chances or ratio of co-housing projects to succeed?
So that 90%, most of those are potluck clubs. People never put up money of any significance. They never got land under contract, and they were all over the map. So they were unable to focus on, this is what we really are trying. This group is focusing on building in this area, let's just talk about affordability, because that's always up, right? I mean, I wish that I had a way that I could finance projects where we could take each person's income and make it work for them. I don't think that it's not possible. There's no way you can do that. And I've been, I came out of the affordable housing world. So if you are looking at, new housing construction in your area and that's out of reach for you, then organize a group that is all below market and go for that. Stop trying to do the combination. I agree, it'd be great to do the combination. I don't know how to finance it. So when you say 90% don't succeed, most of them never went beyond potlucks and really honing in on a specific, willing to put their money up to tie up land and move forward. Very few, I mean, I know some communities don't make it all the way, but very few don't make it all the way once they've taken those initial steps and really put their own money in.
Perfect, thanks. Next question is, for the layman, how can we be sure we're getting good advice?
Well, it's perfectly okay to ask questions, right? I need to understand this better. I'm not getting it, right? But the thing is, the professionals you want to hire, they either have co-housing experience or they have a lot of housing experience, right? So there are no guarantees in life. You get a bunch of architects together, they're going to disagree on lots of things. One of the things I learned as a young architect is that every single contractor always says, well, this is the way we always do it. And it turns out there's a lot of different ways we always do it. So I think you do your research, you make solid decisions, and then you put your faith in the professionals that you have decided to hang with. There's no reason to hire a professional where you doubt their experience, right? So
Thanks.
Make a very deliberate choice early on. Make sure they have the experience you're looking for. Be careful. Like I've made these mistakes. You don't have to make them. I want to hire the contractor where the project we're asking them in the build is the middle of the size of projects they're used to doing. I don't want to hire the contractor where this is the biggest project they've ever done. I've made that mistake many times. It doesn't work. You don't have to do it. So.
Great, thanks. Next question is, we're at a very volatile time in Canada for construction and real estate. Factors of many things: pandemic, housing shortages, shortage of trades, supply chain issues. What kind of advice would you give to a group to not only help them make the leap and also keep focus and not lose their nerve through such a volatile period?
Well, you know what, every time, you know, when 9/11 hit, when the pandemic hit, what I always went to personally is, where do I want to be? I am really glad I'm living in community. I think we are, I don't think this is going away anytime soon. I think the pandemic is just one example. We sort of had this sort of relatively stable climate that most of us grew up in. It's all changing, right? The world's less stable, the climate's less stable. Who's your neighbors? Whose boat are you in? And I know for me, is I am so thankful to be living in community because, you know, we've had fires, we had a big power outage. Most of the county lost power for over a week from a snowstorm right after Christmas. All of that, I'm just so glad to be in community as we face these things. So, you know, you got to decide whether you're up for it. But for me, it is just all the more reason why we want to live in communities, because otherwise you're out there sorting it out on your own. And I know for me, I'm really glad to have neighbors to work stuff through with.
Great, thanks. We probably have time for 2 more questions here. So the exercise of identifying likely or suitable properties is clearly an iterative one requiring many steps and questions. What questions need to be answered first? How to ensure for effective comparisons among potential sites? Well,
you know, really, you rarely get to choose between potential sites. It really comes down to, we can get this one under contract for a price we can actually afford, and it's got the zoning, we can get it approved, you go for it. It's really rare to say, well, we've got all these sites, we could get them all under contract for good contracts, we're agreeable on the price and all of them. That hardly ever happens. The things I would watch for is, I think it's particularly difficult in North America to increase densities. I think Canadians are very much like Americans outside of Vancouver, at least, or Quebec, scared to death of density. And if you want to get neighbors riled up, you're asking to increase density. So that's one I would try to avoid unless the town is already moving in that direction. So that's the other question. And that's why you always want to talk to your planning department, is because sometimes it's not on the maps, it's not in the zoning, but they've already decided at City Hall that this is where we're going to increase density and we're actually looking to move in that direction. So, but really it comes down to, you think, you see a great site, the zoning's perfectly, and you think you can get it under contract until you find out that the owner thinks it's worth $6.5 million instead of $3.5 million, right? So it really, you're not looking for the perfect site. You're looking for a site that you can get under contract and make work.
Okay, we'll just see if we can squeeze in 2 more here. So your comment on deciding not to include a feature during design construction because of cost constraints prioritizing. Question, do communities ever do it later? It seems if it doesn't get done at the start, getting buy-in once built is almost impossible.
Well, it really depends on what sort of thing it is. My community's been adding solar panels ever since we moved in. Right. So I think that if you can if you don't build a common house, you're never going to build it. So I think adding big additions are very difficult, but I think things that, all of us older communities are trying to figure out how to bring in electric vehicle charging now as a retrofit. So I think the kinds of things that communities do, gardens and further adjustments for more resilient communities or energy efficiency, they do that. But the new build, you can build a workshop if you've got a big enough site. So it's just a standalone single building. You can probably get your community members out there, raise some walls and build a workshop. But again, if you don't do the common house initially, I don't think you're ever going to get it.
Great. And the other questions, we'll answer them because most of them we can answer. But this one, do you have a comment on what kinds of support groups might expect to get from a municipality?
I would expect nothing. So one of my, I would say, I've been out there building housing for a long time. I'm pretty pessimistic about support from anywhere. I think one of the interesting aspects about co-housing communities is I feel like I'm taking all you nice community-oriented people and introducing you to the wolves of real estate. And, it's really hard to build housing. I have found municipalities, they say they're going to expedite, but actually they don't know how to expedite anything. So I actually expect almost nothing from municipalities. The best thing you could ask, and this is worth it, is when you're in site search, is to talk to the planning department and say, do you know of any available sites? Are there places there are areas of town you think we should be looking? And I do know co-housing communities who got their land from someone in the planning department, pointed them in the right direction. Otherwise, I really wouldn't expect much of any support from a municipality. And if you get some, consider it extra and you're lucky.
Great. Well, Katie's given you, some of you might be a little discouraged from your dream stage, but I think she's given us really solid ways to move from the potluck club of co-housing that stays in the dream stage into how you really get those wonderful thoughts and that wonderful group into a really grounded project that's actually going to be successful.